Channel, guys. First off, give this video a thumbs up, subscribe and ring the bell if you haven't already. All my social medias are in the comments section of this video. That's my Facebook, my TikTok, my Instagram and my Twitter. I've also left a PayPal link in the comments section of this video also. If you want to go and donate to the channel, that would be great. You don't have to. I just don't put a super chat in or have any of the YouTube things where you can pay money, because YouTube take a lot of that money, and I would rather not have any of that than have people that come on here and support my channel and give money to this channel. I would rather that go to me than YouTube. So I've put a PayPal link in for anybody that does want to donate, but you don't have to. Byron Lacy's book, the link for that could be found in the comments section of this video. That'll take you to Amazon. I suggest you go and read his book, guys, because it's absolutely fantastic. I've also done part 1 with Byron, and his podcast is up on my YouTube channel. I'll leave the link for that in the comment section of this video if you want to go and watch the first one. I suggest you do that, so it will give you a better perspective listening to this. Now, this is a very, what can I say, like, it's a weird subject. Alien abduction. Some people believe it, some people don't believe it. Personally, myself, right, I do believe in alien abduction. Not because I'm a whack job, but there's too many things that have happened on planet Earth. In the past couple of years, the United States government basically have said, look, not aliens exist, but craft not of this earth exists. That has came from their own words. They've said that themselves. So there's things that we can't explain, from Bob Lazar to Commander Fravor, who was a commander of a fleet of pilots. I don't know what the correct title to call that, but he was very high up in the military, who would regularly see UFOs. Now, does a UFO mean that it's alien? No, it just means it's unidentified. But what the governments around the world have been telling us years ago to what they say now is a complete contradiction. So they're telling us now that these things do exist, and people aren't opening their eyes, and people aren't realizing that the information is actually out there if you do a little bit of research. They're not going to put it in the front page of the newspaper. They'll put it in a little article in the middle of the newspaper, and that's what they done during the pandemic. They actually put it in the New York Times, saying that, you know, information on regards to UFOs, and basically confirmed that the United States government believe that these things do exist. But Byron Lacy's story is absolutely mind-blowing, guys. So basically, from the age of 9 right up until the grand age now of 72, this guy has claimed to have been abducted by aliens. I understand the credentials shouldn't matter in this. It should just be somebody's experience that matters in this. But to put this into perspective for you, this guy was a school teacher. This guy worked for the CPS, Child Protective Services. This guy was an established person in life, and he doesn't benefit any way, shape or form by having these experiences or making up these experiences. And he's came on and he's told his story on my channel, and I can't deny it, guys. I do believe him. Now, I respect everybody's opinion. I understand you're going to get people saying, look, this isn't true, that isn't true. I believe him. I believe Byron Lacy's story, and I believe that Byron and many others have had these experiences and we don't know what they are. I can't say to you that they're alien. I can't say to you that it's religious. I can't say to you whatever. All I can say is I believe that this has happened to Byron, and I don't know what it is. But you tell me in the comments section. Tell me what you believe. Do you believe it? Do you not believe it? Watch the first podcast. I'll leave the link, as I say, I'll leave the link for that in the comment section of this video. Watch this one. Make your mind up. Don't just come in here and say none of this is true. Be a bit more open-minded. Listen to all the information and then make your own mind up. I believe it from what I've heard. And there's many documentaries out there, guys. The Phenomenon is one of them, and it breaks down the information that's came out. It breaks that down perfectly. Go and watch The Phenomenon. Go watch Bob Lazar. His story, once again, a incredible story with lots of evidence, like element 115. Now, as I say, this channel is for everything, and it was an absolute pleasure to get Byron on to tell his story on this channel, and I hope he comes back and does a part 3 and we can talk about other things. But remember guys, thumbs up, subscribe, ring the bell. The more likes that I get in this video, the more it helps me in the algorithms, and the more my guests' stories get to be seen. I really hope you enjoy this video guys, because I really enjoyed talking to Byron. Thank you very much for tuning in. Enjoy the podcast, and peace. Byron Lacy, it's great to have you back. Part 1 was absolutely mind-blowing. And guys, if you haven't watched part 1, I'll leave the link for that in the comment section of this video. Go over and check that out. The world's gone crazy, Byron. There's a lot of stuff being talked about today in regards to aliens, in regards to flying saucers. We'll have the Tic Tac that was seen by Commander Fravor in the ocean. But there's not a lot of people out there like yourself. And in part 1, I realized that regardless of if people believe you or not, I believe that you believe 100% that this happened to you. And in doing so, I don't think that you're trying to deceive the public in any way, shape, or form. Your stories, guys, I can't stress this enough. Go and check out part 1. And Byron does have a book. And the link for Byron's book can be found in the comment section of this video. Also, go and check it out. Buy that book and read that book. But Byron has graced us today again. He's going to be telling us more stories from his past to his present. As I say, a lot has happened to Byron in regards to alien abduction, time missing in his life. There's lots of these events. And as you know yourself, if things happen throughout your life, you're going to forget a few things. So he's came back on to do a part 2. And thank you very much, Byron. I hope you're keeping well. I hear it's very hot in Texas at the minute.
I'm doing good. I'm staying inside with the air conditioning on.
77 degrees. That is absolutely crazy.
It's typical for here in this. It's a little bit warm for this time of year, but it'd be this way normally in August.
Yeah. So Byron, where do we start after we left off from the last podcast? Because there's so many, as you say, there's so many things, there's so many experiences through your life in regards to alien abduction. You were very articulate the way you spoke the last time, and the story had me gripped from start to finish. What do you want to just do little individual stories, or do you want to take it from a certain point?
We'll do individual stories, but they're going to be in pretty much in chronological order this time instead of jumping around, except maybe 1 or 2. But I wanted to take up one last thing about the junior college where I went first. The second year there. The second year there, my roommate left about 2 weeks into the semester, and there was no one else to take his place. The dorm father came down and he told me that it's policy to not have one person in a room, but the dean had decided it would be better to have my money than no money at all. So I had a room all to myself for 2 full semesters. And this would make it easier for the aliens to abduct me. So I think that they had a hand in it in some way. Either they got my roommate to leave and join the Marine Corps, which is what he did, or they got the dean to let me stay in the room alone.
Yeah, so just to sort of go over that, you do believe that there was some type of manipulation, if that's the correct word, by aliens to sort of get you by yourself in this college setting. And it wasn't a normal thing for people to have their own room. You were probably the only one in this college campus to have their own room ever. So, you know, once again, another strange thing happening in your life to sort of isolate you, so they could, as you say, most of these things happen at nighttime. And this is a good opportunity now for them to isolate you in the college campus. Yeah, let's hear about this. I'm very interested to hear this story.
Well, that's the story.
So that's just the one singular story.
That's just what happened. Yes. And the next thing I want to talk about happened in 1972 when I lived in Nacogdoches. And it was when my wife and I was married by then, we would always eat pizza on Sunday lunch. And we drove a 68 Volkswagen, which started out, you could pop the clutch like you were coming off the line in a race. And I usually liked to pop the clutch when I was at a stoplight when it turned green. And we were leaving the pizza parlor, and my wife paid for the pizza, and I got a toothpick. And I was following her out when a voice in my head said, "Get Barbara a toothpick." Now, when I thought that was weird, because I always say, "Oh, I should get Barbara a toothpick," not "Get Barbara a toothpick." So I stepped back and got a toothpick, and we went and got into the car, and we pulled onto the road and got up to the stoplight, and it was red, and I was ready to pop the clutch. The minute it turned green, well, it turned green, and the voice in my head said, "Give Barbara the toothpick." So I didn't go. I took the toothpick out of my pocket and I gave it to Barbara, which she didn't want. But at that instant, a motorcycle came through ran his stoplight, came through the intersection, going about 35 or 45 miles an hour. And if I had been on the ball, we would have had a collision. Either he would have hit me or I would have hit him. So from then on, too, I quit doing that because I realized anybody could run a light. But that kept us from having a traumatic situation.
So is this a regular thing? With another thing, sorry, with your experiences with aliens, as you covered in the last one, you talked about the abduction itself. You talked about sort of missing time, but actually a voice inside your head telling you to sort of steer you in the right direction or to stop you in your tracks for something bad to happen. Would that be a regular thing throughout your life to have that voice?
Yes, it happens every once in a while. This was, if I remember right, this was the first time that ever happened.
And that was what year was that?
1972.
1972. I mean, if you had went and if you had not give her the toothpick and you had just drove on, you would have went straight into the bike. Possibly you would have killed somebody and you would have spent the rest of your life, or not the rest of your life, but you would have spent a lot of time behind bars because, in jail for a manslaughter, essentially.
Yes.
It's 7 years in jail.
Either that or he would have hit me because he was running his light.
Yes, he would have went into the side of you then. I believe he probably would have went into the side and maybe would have killed you. So either or, guys, I can't stress this enough. Anybody that's new, that's came in here, that's listening to this story, if you want to piece these stories together, go and watch the first one, and you'll understand why this has a massive significance to what we're talking about now. So leading on by that, what else happened?
Now, in 2005, a similar thing happened, but I wasn't in a car. I was leaving a restaurant with a friend of mine, and we were in Trinity, Texas, and I worked for Child Protective Services. And we had to have our phones with us all the time in case there was an emergency. But we got out into the parking lot, and we were getting ready to cross over to my car, and we had to go past a bread truck that was parked long ways in the middle of the parking lot. And I started feeling around in my pocket for my phone, and it wasn't where I always kept it, which would be in my coat pocket in the breast pocket. And so I checked my other pockets, and we were now right in front of the bread truck. It was to our side. And I reached out and grabbed her arm and said, Brooke, I think I forgot my phone. I think I left it inside. And immediately a fire truck went in front of us where we would have been stepping. It wasn't even a foot away from the bread truck. So it would have caught us if I hadn't stopped her. And we both sort of jerked back. And the fire truck just went on. They didn't even see us. And I said, I think I saved your life. And she said, yeah, I think so too.
And would you ever get any premonitions of these things that will happen in the future, or it's just you've had these little feelings that you've had to get out of a situation, or something's took you away? No premonitions or anything like that, no?
No. The only thing I got was the feeling all of a sudden that I didn't have my phone. And it turns out I did have my phone. It was just in a pocket that I never put it in. So they could have easily made me put my phone in the wrong pocket and then made me look for it. Just the thing about it is, particular point in time.
The thing about it is we always have one scenario in our life that we're like, wow, that was a close call. We've had these scenarios, but with you, there's a common theme throughout your whole life that, you know, as I said in the previous podcast, you talked about a few of them, but it's crazy to think that maybe you've had maybe tens of these scenarios in your life where your life has been saved, or you've saved another person's life. Over maybe, I don't know, what would you call this? Some people are listening to this right now probably thinking this is divine intervention. This is, or maybe, you know, you think this is aliens. But there's something going on in your life. It doesn't matter what it is, but there's definitely 100% that you have these experiences, and something's the cause of it. And it's, in my opinion, it's not a natural occurrence in life that happens to everybody. Would you agree?
Yes, it maybe happens once to somebody, but it's happened either 6 or 9 times. I've got 9 times written down.
Nine times. That's a lot, Byron. That is, like, I have to say that is quite, you know, for your life to be, for one. I don't know if you're much of a risk taker. You're probably, you're in them scenarios where you're, you know, them things are going to happen to you. But as you say, that's just a normal day-to-day thing. You're out and about. You're doing your business. If that's anybody else, you're just another statistic. You're in the newspaper for a death. But you've avoided these in your life 9 times. And it's absolutely crazy to think that that could be aliens. Aliens could be having a hand in your life to save you for whatever reason. Do you think that they're trying... I'm going to have to just say this. Do you think that they are trying to preserve their guinea pig? Or do you think it's a little bit more? Do you think that they actually have a love for you or whatnot?
I don't know for sure. One time when I had a brief psychic communication with them, I asked him, I said, why have you saved my life so many times? And he said, we want you alive. So he wiggled out of that. He didn't give me an answer that told me anything at all. Of course, they wanted me alive. I've often, at this point in time, and the earlier times before I knew I was an abductee, I thought it was spirit guides that were saving me.
That's another question I want to ask you. Are you a religious man?
No.
So
I'm a spiritual person, but I'm not religious.
You don't go to church. You don't believe in Jesus or Allah or any of. You're not like a Muslim or anything.
No, they may exist, but I don't believe in them myself.
Okay. You know, spirituality is a big thing. You know, there's a lot of research. Obviously, we can talk about a whole range of subjects here, just to break up the podcast. But there's a lot of research. When researching your story, a lot of things came to light. There was a guy who was talking about, I don't know if you heard of this, DMT, the spirit molecule.
Yes, I've heard of it.
Well, this guy wanted to test the brain waves and the brain chemistry of people that having the feeling of abduction or abduction experiences. And with the very small study that he done, I forget this guy's name. I'll find out the full study here for you. But he found that there was an increase of DMT produced naturally in the brain. And
Right.
he doesn't know why that happens. Now he says it might not be for everybody, but there could be a direct link to DMT and these experiences that people are having. Not saying that they're not real. He says he believes it 100%. Is like your story to me, I have to say, Byron, I believe you 100%. He said the same thing, but there's a direct link to these things. Just as you talked about spirituality there, and he also talked about whenever you take DMT, everybody sees the same entities. So if I take DMT and you take DMT, we will see the same or similar entities. And that's not something that would happen with a normal hallucinogenic like psilocybin. Everybody has their own different experiences. So the DMT directly linked to spirituality, and the spirituality is directly linked to aliens. And there's a three-way link there. And I think once we find out what that is, we could be on to something.
Sounds logical.
Yeah. A question for you: like you did have an academic career. Did these alien abductions ever affect your academic career?
Well, I really don't know. I think that they did affect me getting some jobs. And I'll talk about one in just a little while where they definitely affected me, where they once again saved my life. And in fact, I'll talk about it now. How's that?
Yeah.
This happened in 1979. I had a job lined up when I got out of school, and it fell through. And so I went in and got a teaching certificate for high school in art and English. And then after that, I had a job lined up. I was going to teach where I did my student teaching. But at the last minute, another teacher at that school decided they wanted that job. They always hire someone in the school if they want it. So I lost that job. And we were without anything. We were without a job, and we were out of school. And I had been trying to find one and couldn't. And I was at a very low point in my life. Well, we found a job throwing newspapers, the Dallas Morning News. It was from 11 at night till 3 in the morning. So we took that job. My wife and I were both going to be doing it, even though only one of us would get paid. And we went to pick up the newspapers, and the woman said, "Now, if you don't finish the week, you don't get paid. So you have to finish the whole week." And we said, okay. We agreed to that. Well, we got the papers loaded into the car, and about halfway through the route, the brakes started squealing every time we'd put on the brakes. And this happened the rest of the evening, over an hour. We got home, and she had told us it was about 100 miles. Turned out it was about almost 300 miles. So we went to bed, and I had this dream. I was in this big room, like an old warehouse, and there was a wooden cabinet, display cabinet like they had in grocery stores in the 1920s and 30s, and probably before that too, just oak with glass front, glass sides, and a glass top, framed in oak. And this man popped out, and he was about 2.5 to 3 foot tall, and his head was round, or he was wearing a helmet, and his head was round. It was like an army helmet. And he said, "He's coming." And then he disappeared. And then another one popped in and said the same thing. And then 2 popped in and said the same thing. And then 1, and then 3. And this happened all night long. Every time I'd wake up, when I'd go back to sleep, it'd be the same dream. And that was all there was to it. Them saying, he's coming. Well, the next day we got ready for the paper route, and Barbara was going to drive. So we got about 3 miles from the house, and the car started shaking. The steering wheel was moving from side to side like this. So we couldn't get over like 35 miles an hour because it was like the front end was totally out of whack. And we got there and we got loaded up with papers, and it kept doing it. It didn't stop. We decided about halfway through that we were going to quit. We felt there were too many miles. We were going to ruin our car. In just a couple of months, we'd have been putting over 1,000 miles a month on the car, which was a lot for that little Volkswagen. And plus, it seemed like, we even said, it seemed like somebody didn't want us to have this job because of the brakes. Now, the next morning, we did take the car in and had the brakes checked. They were fine. They didn't make a sound. He said maybe a rock got stuck in one of them. So we went home, and she said, "Well, you're not getting paid." We said, "Okay, that's fine." So we gave her the newspapers and we went home. And I felt, after everything that had happened and losing these jobs, I felt like a total failure, and I actually felt like committing suicide. And I thought seriously about killing myself whenever the next day I'd go out in the woods and shoot myself. And I fell into this dream after I managed to fall asleep. And it was me and Barbara in a car, and we were driving all over Nacogdoches. We drove everywhere. We drove at the paper route, probably some extra places. And this lasted, I'd wake up and I'd go back to sleep, and we were still driving. Then we stopped at a friend's house. And I went in the backyard. Well, first we sat at a table, a picnic table, and talked. Me, Barbara, and the friend of ours. His girlfriend wasn't there. We sat at the table and talked. And then I decided to go in the backyard. And I left her and went into the backyard. And there was a wooden display cabinet, just like the one where those little guys had popped up. And it had stuff in it. And I didn't think of the little guys, but I started looking, and there was a little rubber head about 3 or 4 inches tall down at the bottom of the display cabinet. And it caught my attention, and I was looking at it, and suddenly it grew into this 6'5" man who was very thin and anorexic looking. And he was sort of scary, even though he wasn't doing anything frightening. And he said, "Don't worry. Everything is going to be fine. Don't kill yourself. We have schools for you." And then he had me kiss his cheek. And his body sucked up into his head, which turned into a crystal, looked like a glass or a crystal skull, even though I have never heard of the crystal skulls at that time. And then he flew away. And I woke up. And Barbara woke up at the same time. And I said, "I just had the strangest dream." And she said, "So did I." Well, in her dream, we drove around. Then we stopped at that same friend's house. And now in them, we all got in a car, an old car that was abandoned and just sitting there to talk instead of the picnic table. And then I decided to go in the backyard, and she and the guy hid under the car because they were afraid because the landlord was coming. And she said she was worried that the landlord was coming and I was going to have to face him alone. And then she woke up and I woke up. So we basically had the same dream, even though parts of it were different. Well, that day, since I told the guy I wasn't going to kill myself, I decided I wasn't going to. And since he had schools for me, I was going to find out what that meant. Well, we went to a bookstore, a metaphysical bookstore that was in this woman's house, and these two people came in while we were there that we had met once before, and we liked them. They were a little younger than us, but both of them in college, and we were talking about the job and how it fell through. And he said, well, they're hiring janitors at the college. I just got a job there. You should go over there. So I went to the college and applied for the job, and they hired me right on the spot because I had been a janitor before. Well, the man that hired me took me and this woman that they had just hired also into another room, and they had two stands with a felt type surface on them and outlines for 4 buildings. And he put our names on these sticky plastic things with his gun. He typed our names out on there. And then he put them on her in one building, me in the other. And then he stood back and crossed his arms and looked at it for a minute. And then he changed it where he moved me into her building and her into my building. When he did that, he put me on the floor in the education building where I had just gotten my teaching certificate. And the very first day of work, my major professor for my guidance professor for getting my certificate, he walked in to a room I was cleaning and he said, "What are you doing here?" Because the last he had heard, I was going to get that teaching job where I did the student teaching. I told him how it fell through and everything. And he said, "Well, don't you worry. I'm going to get you a job. And I've got a lot of connections, a lot of people I know." Well, I worked there for a year. And at the end of that year, he called me into his office and he said, "Well, I have 2 job offers for you." He had asked me where I wanted to be working at. And I said, well, I wanted to work in East Texas. So these 2 were in Livingston, Texas. One of them was teaching remedial reading and art in high school. And the other was teaching accelerated English or advanced English and art in junior high. Well, I took the high school job because I wasn't very good in grammar and stuff like that. I was more into literature. And so the first school was the college. And the second 2 schools, which I chose one, were the ones at Livingston High School. So he was right. They had schools for me.
That's absolutely mind-blowing.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many elements to that. I will have to watch this back to go through that and then ring you on the phone and be like, because you've said so much and every piece has its little component that you think, wow. I mean, the dream, to have that type of a dream, to go through that type of adversity, to say to yourself, I'm going to commit suicide here, I'm going to end it, to get that dream. I can only imagine what you were feeling that night, having those thoughts. If there's anybody out there that's having them thoughts, speak to somebody, contact somebody. There's a lot of these things happening around the world at the minute. You know what I mean? There's, just speak to anybody. There's places that you can talk to. Just Google these numbers. But to have that dream and then to be told that message, to go through that, and then for him to swap you around, and then you're on the floor where you got your teaching certificate, and then you're the guy that gave you the certificate, I forget the title that you give him, he actually got you a job at the end of the year, and it was a job teaching. Now that's not the most ironic part, or that's not the spooky part, but you were told in your dream you will get a job teaching. And I mean, how do you explain that?
I don't know, but they knew the day before because the dream from the night before was telling me that this man was going to come. So they had already had all this planned out. Maybe before it even started, they knew what was going to happen. And, I've read and I've experienced that they know what our future is going to be.
what you're talking about, Byron, is biblical. I don't care what anybody says, right? It's a very controversial topic, but people come to me and they say to talk to me about religion, this and religion that. Okay, there's certain elements to religion, that are factual, and there's certain elements that isn't. But I'm telling you 100% that I believe what you're telling me. I know you're telling me the truth, and that is, to me, if a religious person is deciphering everything that you're saying, that's a biblical moment in your life. That's a very spiritual, very religious moment in your life that cannot be explained, and it's mind blowing. I'm absolutely mind blown.
It blew my mind too. We thought we were very fortunate.
And did you go on then to have a career then, a good career in English?
I taught there for 2 years, and then after that, I was able to do my art for a while until things fell apart in the economy. And then I had to get a job again. And in that job, I also, I'll jump to that now. I was going to do this chronologically, but I'll do this.
No, listen. You can do it whatever way you want. It's just I'm probably upsetting your whole organized sort of thing that you've had going here. I'm chaotic, but if you want to do it, if you want to go back to any stories and work it through there, that's 100% fine. They're all mind blown, Byron. It doesn't matter what way you tell them. They're all absolutely mind blown.
This happened in 1985, and I had to have a job. Well, I'd always wanted to teach at college instead of high school. Really, that was my main goal, but it never happened. But anyway, there was a big meeting in California where you could go, and they were going to have people from all the colleges, or most colleges would be there, and you could even be interviewed and hired there. But it was going to take all the money I had. And so I had bought this book, and it had a psychic in it that for some reason I was drawn to his picture. And I decided to call him to ask him if I should leave Nacogdoches or if I should stay, and if I should go try and get a job in California. Well, he said, you should stay in Nacogdoches. You're being watched over. And I said, watched over? And he said, yes. I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, I see two hands and you're in them, which shows me that someone is taking care of you. And I said, well, who is it? Is it an angel? Is it a spirit guide? He said, I don't know. They won't let me see who they are, but they're looking after you, and you should stay in Nacogdoches. So that's all he knew about that. And he said, everything's going to work out fine. You're going to get a job. And I said, okay. Well, that evening I went outside and I said, look, if I was talking to him, whoever they were, I said, if y'all want me to stay in Nacogdoches, I've got to have a job, and I've got to have a job now. And I said, if I don't get a job, I'm going to take all the money out of the bank and I'm going to go to California and try and get a job there, whether it works or not. So it's up to y'all. Well, that evening, I got a phone call from a friend, and she told me she had gotten a job working for the home energy program at the Department of Human Services that was going to last 6 months. And then she had a chance to go to work as a eligibility specialist with the Department of Human Services for food stamps, Medicaid, and AFDC. But her boyfriend had just called her, and he wanted her to marry him and move to West Texas. And that's what she was going to do. And she thought about me for this job, and she gave me the phone number to call the woman that was doing the hiring. So the next day I called her, and she had me come in. She was going to be my supervisor if she hired me. Well, I sat down, and she asked me my name, and I told her my name. She asked me my college education, and I told her I had 3 degrees. And then she started talking. She didn't talk about the job. She talked about her life. She talked about everything. She talked for an hour, just talk, like she was starved to talk to someone. And then as she finished, she looked at me and she said, "Well, if you want it, you've got the job." And I said, "Well, I want it." So I started work there, and at the end of 6 months, I ended up going to work for the Department of Human Services, doing an eligibility specialist, which was interviewing people to see if they were eligible for these benefits. And I worked there for 14 years.
I'm trying to think of a pattern to your occupations. It seems like you're always in an occupation where you're dealing with, I suppose, what occupation doesn't deal with people to some degree, but you're always in occupations that are like, do you know what I mean? Like they're very valued occupations. Like that job to the psychic, and then getting that job, that occupation's like, there's some people that had nothing, and it was up to you whether these people get something. They get something to eat.
It's usually helping people.
Helping people, like, as I say, teaching is the best job in the world. To progress the future generation, helping the needy out, or maybe not the needy, but people that are on the benefits that need them. And then going on further to child services. I mean, there's a call in there. I see something there. So is that a regular thing with the psychic? I mean, something stands out there, just to ask you a few questions about that. You know, this, for him to pick up on that, and for psychics not to go into great detail, but for him to say, look, I see hands and you're in the middle and you're being protected. Normally they go into a bit more detail, but for him just to say that to you sort of does indicate that, you know, he wasn't talking bullshit. He was actually getting some type of a reading. I mean, that's, once again, mind-blowing.
Because he could have made it up. He could have said it was an angel. He could have said anything. But he said that he saw these hands. That's all. And they wouldn't let him see anything else.
It's a very biblical thing, though. I'm getting this sense that there's a type of a biblical aspect of this, like the hands. Once again, like the hands out. Have you ever seen, like, you know, Catholicism? They have the hands, the whole, you know, you take your the communion and you put your hands out like that. It's like there's a protection. It's like it's so strange, and you felt protected by these. I know you want to go through a whole timeline here. Have you ever felt hostilities from these aliens?
From who?
From the have you ever felt like they were going to be hostile towards you? Have you ever had bad feelings, like negative feelings about them?
Oh, the people I was helping?
No, the aliens. The aliens.
Oh, no. No, they always seem to be taking care of me or watching after me. Or, oh, by the way, last week I found 2 bruises on my right knee on the inside that were like the alien bruises. So they did come and check on me. They were here one night.
This guy's, anybody that's watching this right now, this is active. This is from when Byron was 9 years of age, right up until you're in your 70s now, Byron, aren't you?
Yes, 72.
72 years of age. They're still active in Byron's life, and he's never felt like they were going to be hostile towards him. They've actually helped him for whatever reason he doesn't know. And as you can see, I'm going to have to point out a few things for the viewers here. Whenever I'm speaking to Byron about this whole subject, he doesn't care about the technology. He's not going on about the different life. Like I'm interested in where did they come from? Their technology. They're the things that really interest me. But you're only here to tell your experiences. You're not really, you know, you're not here thinking about, oh, they're from Mars, they're from wherever. You're talking about your experiences. And a lot of people that are talking about these things, I've listened to a few now, you know, as I've got in contact with you, I've listened to other people, and they want to talk about, they want to have ideas about what they are. You actually don't really care. You're just sort of you're just telling your experiences. You can't explain it, and this is what they are, and there's no explanation for it apart from it's biblical, it's religious, it's spiritual, or aliens.
When I wrote my book, I wanted to help people who are being abducted. just to see what happens to somebody else, because I knew that they would relate to it and it might give them a little comfort at the
Do
same
you
time.
come across people that have been abducted?
Yes, sometimes. Of course, now I
And
do on the internet.
yeah, and do you on the internet? I mean, is there any verification process for you to sort of to have it in your head that this guy or girl's not telling you bullshit? They're not just doing it for attention. I mean, what's the key factors that stand out to you of abduction?
Well, the funny thing is, a lot of people, like I'm on a support page on Facebook, and I screen people to see if they get on. And a lot of people say, "Oh, I've never been abducted, but I've seen UFOs, and I've always been interested in them." And those are like two criteria for being an abductee. I mean, it just happens. If you're an abductee, you've seen UFOs. And if you've never seen a UFO, there's a good chance you've never been abducted.
So you're categorically stating right now, and with your experiences and your opinion, is that if you have seen a UFO, there's a good chance that you yourself could be an abductee?
If you've seen it up close.
Up close.
Now, if you've seen what might be a star, but it just shoots out or flies away, that's a different thing. Anybody can be seeing that that's looking up at the sky. But if you see one where you see the UFO, you see the details of it, then you're probably being abducted.
Well, there was a story I heard in the US. I forget, it was a comedian, and he was talking about his dad, who was a real American, and he says that he's seen a UFO, and he never believed in them. But at the point of where he's seen the UFO so close, he says, I could have shot it with my gun. And he goes, by the time I turned around to get my gun, I thought to myself, if I shoot at this thing, it's going to think that I'm hostile, because he instantly knew it wasn't from this world. But as he turned around to speak to his wife, who was in the house, to call her out, he says time just distorted. And he looked back, and it was there, but it was a different time of the day. And it sort of relates to what you're saying about the whole time missing in your life. And guys, go check it out if you're listening this year. Check out the first podcast. Byron breaks all this down. But the time distortion for me is fascinating. To have that type of technology or that type of ability is crazy.
Right. The missing time is real intriguing. I'm going to go on to another thing that happened in.
You work away, Byron.
In '84, two different things happened in 1984. One of them was I was driving home with my wife, and this was the last year we were married. But we turned a corner that we were getting ready to turn onto our road where we live, and on the other side of this pasture, there was a white luminous egg about 35 or 45 feet tall, floating perfectly straight across above the trees. And I saw it and I go, wow, look at that. And Barbara looks at it, but she doesn't see anything. So I try to show her where it is. She still doesn't see anything. I actually stopped the car, got out and got inside and took her head and looked over the top of her head and aimed it at the egg, which was still slowly moving along. And she never saw it at all.
So she couldn't see it as she got bad eyesight?
They were keeping her from seeing it.
And you were able to witness this. You were able to see this egg-shaped, 40-foot long egg-shaped glowing object, but Barbara couldn't. I mean, how do you even react to that? What do you say at that moment? I mean, that's another thing. The way you explained something in the first podcast, that you believe that they can distort what you see. So what you see mightn't actually be what it is. I remember you said, I'm paraphrasing here, something about a plane. They can take something, an object that's human, and put it into your head and make their craft look like that. Do you think that's maybe what they were doing with Barbara at the time?
Yes. They were just making her not perceive it.
That's
I don't know why, unless she just wasn't ready.
There's a word for that. I forget the word. I apologize, but there is a word for it. When researching this, I did actually find a word for that. And when you're talking about these things, does Barbara think that you're going crazy?
Well, we hadn't really talked about them. I didn't know at that time that I was an abductee.
But that's what I mean. Does she actually think that you're going crazy, that you're seeing these things?
No, she thinks that they're spirit guides or something caused that. We had another experience that happened that she did see. We like the Mothers of Invention, and when when a new album would go out, we got one of them. And this one was in 1978, and I would read the words because you couldn't always understand what they were saying. So the first time I'd read the words out loud while we listened to it, and I was reading it, and it was about halfway through the record, and suddenly it had this long record scratch, which is not unusual for, they used all kinds of noises. And then it took up in another song, and I looked, and that song wasn't on that side of the record. The record had actually somehow turned over. She had been watching it, and it hadn't turned over physically. Somehow it apparently just manifested on the other side and was playing that. We couldn't explain that. And we played the record through again, and sure enough, there was not a record scratch, and it didn't change sides.
Do you think at that moment there was something happening in regards to an abduction point? Do you think that was an abduction point to you?
It could have been, but I don't know. It didn't seem like it. We didn't seem to have missing time, but we could have, because one of the things about missing time is they can make you not realize it.
Well, we did talk about this in the first one, about the times that you have felt that, you said that time you were turning around in the tent, and it was 6 hours. It took you like 6 hours to turn around in the tent. Like from one tent, you moved from here to here, point A to point B, and it was only a turn in the bed. And when you turned around, it took you 6 hours. So, I mean, that's only the times that you felt that, but maybe that's actually a rare time. Maybe they're abducting you, whatever, every other night, every 3 nights, whenever they can, and it happens more frequent than what you think.
That's entirely possible. Do you think I could turn on an air conditioner?
Yeah, work away. Yeah, it's as long as it's not like yeah, work away.
We'll see if it works. If not, I'll turn it off.
Just to let you know, guys, Byron is sitting in, I think he said to me there, 70 degrees Celsius.
77.
77 degrees Celsius in Texas.
Outside.
I came on the podcast and I says to Byron, it's an Irish summer. It was 35 degrees today. I'm melting. And he laughed at me. He says it's 77 degrees here. And no, 35 degrees in Ireland, and he says they're set at 77 degrees in Texas. Wow. I don't know how you deal with that.
Like I said, I stay in the house and leave the air conditioners on.
Are you sure you aren't all getting heat stroke? You maybe could all be getting heat stroke over there, and you are seeing aliens, but what it really is just heat stroke all the time.
No, it's not heat stroke, but people do die from the heat here in Texas, even up in New York, because it gets pretty bad. And people that don't have air conditioners, like they've found people dead in their tub full of water that they were trying to keep cool.
How is that? Obviously it's off topic, but it's really like America. To us, I'm European. I'm Irish, but I'm European. To us, America is so strange. And just a curveball for you here. Do you think that the reason why there's so many stories that are coming out of America and there's so many of these alien abduction stories from America is because the American government are doing something?
Well, they were covering it up for a long time. They were denying that it happened. No, we didn't have spaceships in the 1940s and 1950s even. Um, we didn't have the abilities, you know. So I don't think that that's it. It's just that America is so big, and it's one country, even though it's like a bunch of little countries, but it's so big.
And you're a free nation. You're a free country, like for instance, Russia, China. These are very, Russia's, in my opinion, it's a fake democracy. China's, well, they're communists. Like, well, they say that they're socialists, but they're communists essentially because they support North Korea. A lot of these countries, in my opinion, things could happen, but a lot of it's not really publicized because the country maybe suppresses that information. Where America, where maybe they suppress the information also, they don't have the ability to suppress all of it. Hence why you're getting these incidents like Roswell, which is a complete contradiction. If you actually, guys, go and watch the documentary The Phenomenon, it's on Amazon. Trust me, guys, once you see that movie and you hear the information in that movie, you'll realize that everything that you've ever known about this. Well, I have to say it, Byron. I have to say this. The United States government basically has came out and said that they've verified 3 videos of UFO craft. They verified them. They say this is real. This is not of this world. We don't know what this is. It's not from any other country. This is real UFOs, and they move and at a speed that has never been seen before. They're the angles that they can move at, and it makes no noise, and they can't be picked up on radar. So essentially, this is craft not of this planet. And the fact that the world isn't talking about this more makes me angry because it's real. They verified it to us. We know it's real now. And it's like they're still playing games with us. I mean, can you name the different ships that you've seen? Are they all different shapes and sizes?
I've seen 2 that look like stars, except they were about 1,200 feet up in the air, and they suddenly just shot off. I mean, way across the sky at a phenomenal speed. I've seen one that looked like an egg. I've seen one that looked like that was tubular, and it was about 500 feet long. It was right above my front yard, and it was about 1,200 feet up. And it was white, and it had it got smaller at one end, and then it got big again, like a band on a cigar, only a little wider. It was very proportionately designed, and it just hung there, moving a little bit with the wind. It was actually a beautiful blue sky, some clouds, but nothing obscuring my side of it. And I didn't have my camera with me or my phone.
Well, look, we're going to get back into those stories that you were talking about there, but I do believe that there's what you're witnessing there is different ships, like humans. We've got a military, and we have different craft that do different types of jobs, and maybe that's what you're witnessing there.
Yes, I think so. Now, one of the ships, 2 things happened in 1984. And one of them, I was out on a date with this girl. We went to a movie, and it was during the day. We went to a matinee, and we went for a ride out in the country to give us some time to talk afterwards. We topped a hill, and I looked up, and up above us, it looked like the moon on fire at about 1,200 feet in our atmosphere. And we went down the other side, and we went under the moon where we couldn't see it. And I we both turned to each other and we said, "Did you see that?" at the same time. And I told her what I'd seen, and she'd seen the same thing. And we turned around to go look for it, and it wasn't there. So I took her on home, and then I went to Dairy Queen to get something to eat. When I walked in, they played radios in those days in a lot of restaurants instead of canned music. The news was on the radio, and it said, and something, I caught it in the middle, but it said, something strange was seen over Nacogdoches. And then that was all that was said about that. So evidently other people saw it too. And I have heard of someone else seeing the moon on fire.
I mean, that's sort of, to me, right? If I'm a private investigator and I'm listening to your story and I have to investigate certain things to do with your story, I'm not looking at the things that I can't prove. I'm looking at the things that I can prove. And for you to see that, and then for you to tell your story, what you've said in the previous podcast right up till now, and then you come out with things like that other people have witnessed this, other people have seen the same things of you, and not only that, other people have said stuff on a radio that hundreds of people have seen, and then you sort of you try to co-align that in with the rest of your story. It makes sense. It makes sense. I mean, I've never seen the moon on fire. I've never seen an object that looks like the moon's on fire in the sky. I've never seen a UFO. I don't know. But that's once again, Byron, just mine's just blown, because you've verified that other people have seen this.
Now, another thing happened in 1984. I was still married to Barbara at that time. We divorced by the time I saw the UFO. But we belonged to a video club. And when you'd sign in, you'd give them your birthday. And they would look it up on their computer, and then they'd take your video and either take the one you had and give you a new one. And you got one a day for free, if I remember right, or for $1. Probably for $1. Well, they said, we're going to change everybody's listing from their birthday to their social security number. So could you give me your social security number? I said, I don't want mine changed. And they said, well, we're sorry. And I said, but I like my birthday. And they said, well, you've got to change it. So I gave him my social security number, and he changed it. The next day I went in to give him my film to return it. And they asked my social security number, and I gave it to them, and they typed it in, and they couldn't find my name anywhere. And then they found it. Finally, she said, well, what's your birthday? I told her that, and she found it. It was there under my birthday. So she changed it, and I turned in the old one and got a new one. And the next day I went back, and the same thing happened. Well, the manager was there. No, on the fourth day, the manager was there, and he said, we've been trying to change your number, but it won't change. So we're going to just leave it on your birthday. And I said, okay. And I thought maybe I would psychically somehow control their computer, because of wanting this. But then I'm going, well, it doesn't mean that much to me. See, I think the aliens manipulated their computer. Well, a year later goes by, and there was a new guy working there, and he looked mine up, and then he asked for my social security number, and he changed it, and it changed. It stayed changed after that.
What's the relevance to that in your life? Why would they manipulate that?
They were just playing a joke on me.
So you reckon that's actually humor?
Yeah, they have a strange sense of humor. Very dry.
I mean, it is very dry, but I suppose if you can tamper with something, like they can't come down and do a stand-up comedy gig in your house, but what they can do is they can come down, or they can, I don't know, from wherever they are, sort of do little things like that. For what's going on, but nobody else does, and sort of makes you laugh inside. And that had no relevance at all to anything in your life. That was just a joke.
Right. Just a joke. They've done things like that to me before. I'll tell you about another one in just a few minutes, but I'm going to go
Yeah,
ahead
yeah.
and go. In 1996, two things happened. Well, in 89, I had a spirit, it seemed like, channeled through me at an opening that I was at while I was talking to this woman. She was telling me about her husband and he was deceased, but that she felt he watched after her. And I felt these vibrations suddenly go in through the bottom of my feet and come all the way up my body and out and down and up and down and up and down, and then were gone. And I said, well, I think he was just here. And she said, I do too. So that wasn't the aliens that did that, but they may have allowed me to somehow channel a spirit. Now,
Do,
1990,
no, sorry, go ahead.
in 1996, I was meditating in my room, and I had a pillow over my head to block out the light and to block out sound. And suddenly, and I was in pretty deep, suddenly I felt these two hands grasp me by the ankles and pull me down on the bed where my head came out from under the pillow. I laid there and I couldn't open my eyes because I didn't know what I was going to see. But I thought, well, you got to open your eyes. And there was nothing there, nobody there. But my head was out from under the pillow. I'd felt the hands. And then just a month or so later, I lay down to meditate. And when I closed my eyes, I saw these two men or two beings standing over in the corner of the room. And they had some kind of a notebook with them, an electronic notebook. We didn't have electronic notebooks in 96 that I know of, but it looked like those look now. And as I opened my eyes and they were gone, I closed my eyes and they were back, and they looked like they were wearing spacesuits. And I thought towards them, what are y'all doing? And one of them stopped and looked at me and he said, we're monitoring your energy levels. And then he finished with his book and they were gone.
And once again, what you're seeing might not actually be the correct vision of what that is, because your mind's being distorted. But another thing stands out to me, Byron, and I have to react to this, because I think I can give you a little bit of input into this. So you talked about meditation, right? Now, recently, we have discovered through science that through certain breathing techniques that we can release DMT through breathing and meditation. And I do believe that whatever's going on, you're very susceptible to this, to these, whatever these entities, these other beings. And I also believe that you probably have a very high amount of natural DMT in your body in regards to your meditations and things like that. If I got pulled, if my legs got pulled and my head came from under the pillow, I don't know what I could do. I would be absolutely, it doesn't matter, woman, man, you would be petrified. I mean, that is the most frightening experience anybody could have.
Because if somebody had gotten into my house without me knowing it and was messing with me, but then they were gone. I never saw them at all.
You said spacesuits, but as I say, we can never just take what you see as that's what they look like, because at the end of the day, they can just, as you said in your own words, and I do believe you, but in your opinion, they can distort what you see through your eyes. So we actually don't know if that's the correct sort of vision.
Right. They could have been wearing spacesuits. They could have been wearing something else. They could have not been wearing anything at all.
Yeah, that's true.
Like the guy in the dream, the real tall man that had me kiss his cheek, I think that was a mantis creature. And that's why I was afraid of him. But he looked like a man. He was just very thin. Well, the mantis is very thin too.
Yeah, guys, and remember, check out the first podcast where he explains the mantis the sort of the mantis alien, if you want to call it, where he explains what that is. Go check that out. That will be in the comment section of this video. Please check that out. It will give a lot of relevance, and it will bring a lot of these stories together that you're hearing now. So if you're watching this for the first time, check that out. The link for that will be in the comment section of this video. So have you got more, Byron?
I had another psychic in that same year that told me that someone was looking out after me. They didn't know who or what or anything like that, or what. They just mentioned it as one thing that they were saying.
I mean, was it a psychic in the sense there's all different types? So if you look at the sort of the pattern to psychics, some of them will give you sort of future premonitions. Some will tell you about what loved ones said. But you've had two psychics tell you that there's somebody looking out for you. And did he say a similar, or he or she say a similar thing to the first?
No, she didn't mention the hands or anything. She just said someone was looking out for me. Just like she said it in passing. She would tell me mostly things about the future, and she was a card reader, and she used regular playing cards, not tarot or anything. She was an old-fashioned card reader.
Do you believe in that stuff, Byron?
Well, almost everything she ever told me happened, so yes. It depends on the person, you know. Like, I've had some tell me stuff that nothing they said happened at all. And then I've had a few that everything they said happened.
Another thing that stands out, and I really have to stress this, go watch the first one, guys. You've said to me, what you see, they see. And we joked about in the first podcast where I said, look, well, if the aliens are listening right now, you are more than welcome to jump on a podcast with me and Byron, and we're going to do a podcast together and get this all straightened out, and you can come into human civilization, and we'll slow drip you into human civilization, and you know what I mean, and people won't be scared of you. Do you still stand by that you believe that you've been tampered with to a certain degree, that they can actually see out through your eyes?
Yes.
So they could be possibly looking at me right now?
Yes. They probably are.
Well, listen, I'm going to say it once again. I don't want to be abducted, but if you want to come on the podcast with me and Byron, you're more than welcome. Doubt it, though.
That would be fun.
Yeah.
Now, another thing happened in 1999. This was before that. Now something I'll talk about that happened in 1999. I had been practicing meditating, and I felt that there was a door in the back of a person's head, so to say, where your spirit would go out when you died. And I wanted to see if I could get through that door. So I meditated on it every day for months. And one night I was getting ready to get into bed, and this voice in my head said, "You're going to be given the opportunity to die." And I thought, that's a weird thing for me to think, because I thought it was my thought. I still didn't know about aliens at that time. And that happened 3 nights in a row. On the 4th night, it didn't happen, and I didn't think about it. I wish it had happened, because then I would have realized what was going on. But I started meditating, and things started leaving me. Hang-ups, sadnesses, just thoughts. They started leaving my body and going away. And I was getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And I was getting happier and happier and happier. And it got to where I was like a pinpoint. I couldn't feel my body. I couldn't tell if I was breathing. None of that stuff. And suddenly, a light, and I didn't know what was happening. Like I said, if they'd have said that again, I probably would have known that I was getting ready to die. A light came up beside me, I was in this complete blackness, and I was this tiny speck, and there was this huge light, but I could look at it, and it didn't blind me. It was like a light that didn't emit light, or to me, because I didn't have eyes. And then I'm going, what is this? And I felt like I could move into it. Then I thought, I wish there was somebody here I could talk to find out what's going on. And nobody said anything. And I thought, what if I can't get back out? I live 12 miles from town. What if I got out and I was having a heart attack? So that shows in a way I probably did know, but I didn't at the same time on most levels. So I said, well, I'm not going to go. And this voice goes, huh, you said you wanted this, and I got it for you, and now you're not going to go. And it laughed 3 times sarcastically, ha. And the light turned into a sphere. Ha. The sphere got smaller. Ha. Everything was gone. And I was back in my body, and I was back normal.
Do you think that that was you passing over to death?
Yes. I think I was at the light, and I could have gone in it, and then I would have died. But I think in a way I could have gotten back. But I had a teacher that I met later that year who was a physicist and had worked for a dark lab in the government. And he said I did the right thing because I'd always felt like I messed up. He said you did the right thing because you wouldn't have come back.
So your friend who is a physicist sort of is in agreement with you that these things can happen?
Yes.
A physicist.
Now, we didn't talk about aliens at that time because I still didn't know about them. I didn't know about them until 2009. That was in 1999. But at one point where I was meditating, I saw this multi-shaped, colored shape, a tetrahedron is what he said it was. And he said that's associated with blocked memories. And I said, well, I don't think I have any blocked memories. And he said, well, apparently you do. And when I found out I was abducted and I told him, that was the last I heard from him. We talked through email and stuff. And I asked him about aliens, and he said he couldn't tell me anything.
Was he spooked, or did he think you were crazy and he just didn't get back to you?
No. I don't know why he left. Now, a year or two later, I did briefly talk with him through email and got an answer, but that was it. Now, in 2000, I got married and I moved into town. You want to say something?
Oh yeah, there's one thing I have to say, and I know I've done a lot of talking on this one. I apologize, but I have to because there's things in my head that I have to get out. There's one thing that I have to say. The fact whenever you were, as you say, crossing over to die, and you were hearing these voices, do you believe that that voice was an alien?
Yes.
Well, then to me, that
somehow he had arranged all of this.
Well, then, for me, what I'm thinking there is, and then they can manipulate. So that's what I'm looking for. Is the point of is when we die, and we just hypothetically speaking, you go off to heaven, right? To say all that's true, or you go to hell, or whatever you believe in, doesn't matter. But whenever you die, you go from point A to point B, your soul. But now what you're talking about is the alien is speaking to your soul. And that's different from them speaking to your physical body right now.
Right.
So they could be we're just talking here. We're not saying any of this. Is what I'm saying here is the truth. But then essentially the aliens can control what happens when you die. So that makes them biblical.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Or whatever, religious, spiritual, whatever.
In a sense, except that they don't expect anyone to worship them or anything like that.
Well, what's
And
to
they
say
only help who they want to.
well, what's to say the figures that we haven't? We don't worship like Jesus, Allah, Buddha. What's to say that these people weren't that? What's to say religion and aliens aren't the exact same thing? As you say, they can project things, they can make us see a different version of them. So, what's to say that these holy figures throughout history aren't aliens?
They could be. I mean, a lot of people speculate that they are. I think they could be.
And they could be the same thing.
Quality.
It doesn't mean that we're not. When I say that, I'm not trying to say that heaven or hell or isn't real. It could be an answer to that, though, and it could be a far better answer to all the questions that we want to know, because at least now we have that premise, that idea of that's what it could be. And the alien itself, what we're calling it alien, I hate calling it alien, but it itself could be that, and that could be the answers that we're looking for. I'm just throwing it out there. I had to say that. Listen, I apologize for butting in. Go ahead, Byron. You go and move on to the next one.
In 2005, I went to work for CPS, and I had worked at Walmart for a year, and two different people came in while I was there towards the end and said and I didn't know them, but they asked me if I was Byron Lacy. I said yes. And they said, well, they're hiring investigators for Child Protective Services. You should go apply for a job. I bet they'd give you one. And the first one, I sort of shrugged it off because it's a very hard job, and I didn't really want to do it. But when the second one said that, I thought, oh, I'm going to go check it out. And I got hired for doing that. And then in 2006 was when the car accident happened in the restaurant parking lot, or didn't happen, but almost did. And two different things happened with CPS. We had to be on call 1 week a month. We were on call 24/7, so they could call you in the middle of the night. And I missed a call, which is a bad thing to miss a call. And I had the phone sitting right next to me. Well, I was determined not to ever miss a call again. So I took a microphone and an amplifier and hooked it up. And I amplified the phone where you could probably hear it in the next apartment. And two other times I missed a call, even with it amplified like that. So to me, they had taken me out of the apartment when those things happened. But of course, I didn't know about them yet. And
wow.
One last thing that happened in 2008, this was another sort of a dry humor joke. I was watching this TV miniseries, The Tudors, and I really liked, I think it was Anne Boleyn. I really liked her a lot. Whichever one married the king and he beheaded her. Well, on the night that they were going to have her beheading, I didn't realize it until we got into the show, and they already had her arrested. They were going to behead her, and I said, I don't want to see this. I don't want to see this. And when it got to it, the picture froze. You could still hear the sound, the dialogue, and everything going on underneath. You could hear the axe drop. And then after she was beheaded, the picture took up where it would have normally been. It didn't, all that was skipped. It was just a still picture. And I mentioned that to a friend who watched that same show the next day. And she said, well, mine didn't freeze. Because I wanted to know if hers had frozen. Well, I went home and I tape recorded the shows just in case I wasn't there to see them. And I watched it, and it didn't freeze on the recording. I was watching the exact same show on my TV, so they froze it. And once again, I thought maybe psychically I had somehow blocked it.
And for any kids that are watching, right? And when I say kids, I mean like real kids that do, tape recording something, it would record the exact thing that's on the TV screen. So if there's any skips, if there's any bumps, it's not like a DVD or downloading something today. I remember recording loads of things in tapes, and any sort of inconsistencies or any little ailments that were happening during the show would be recorded onto the tape. So the fact that that happened, it should have been recorded onto the tape. So, I mean, maybe there is something, maybe you do have that ability at certain times, distress times, you didn't want to see that and you didn't see it. So it could be, once again, it could be a bit of both, that you do have that ability, but you have that ability because of A, B, and C, these experiences that have happened to you.
I think it was then, though, but then I discovered that I was abducted in April of 2009. And around the end of April, I was watching television, and I was going to watch The Matrix, which I had seen several times. So I decided to scroll through the shows real quick to see if there was anything else I wanted to see. There wasn't, so I went back, and the closing credits were coming on. The whole TV show had played in just a few minutes, or it was missing time. You see how they covered it up so perfectly.
But at that stage of your life, though, see, that's a big leap, because that's a movie, that's direct time, because they know they take you from the start of that to the end of that, and they place you at that point, then you're going to know. It's like your progression of abduction. Like, they wouldn't have done that at the start.
No.
If you were 9 years of age, they wouldn't do that at the start.
Yes, it was like I was sitting in front of a clock,
That's what I mean. It's like level 1000. Level 1000 abduction. The perfect moment, and the Matrix of all movies, do you know what I mean? And the irony of that. But I mean, there should be somebody should do a movie about this, Byron.
I wish they would. But on May 7th, on May 6th at night, I started cleaning up my closet, and I had everything drug out, and it was on both sides of my bed, and I was going to refix it, organize it the next day. So I went to bed, and I got up, and I had to crawl out the bed at the foot of the bed, and I went to the refrigerator, and I got a soft drink. I was still bleary-eyed. I put it in my hand, and I popped the top, and then I changed hands, and there was a smear of blood about the size of a postage stamp in the center of my hand. And I looked, and it was on the can. Well, I washed my hand, and there was a puncture in the very center of my hand, so the blood had been on my hand. Well, I figured, okay, if this happened to me while I was in bed, then if it happened to me when I was out of bed, there would be a blood trail, because I had to climb in from the foot of the bed. There wasn't one, but when I took the pillow and moved it, there was a blood stain on the bed where I'd slept like this, and then there was a blood stain on the pillow from where I'd turned over onto my other side. And it was still just wet enough. I mean, it had solidified, but the water from the can made it liquid again. I washed it off, and within 6 hours, it was gone. The hole was gone. I could scratch my hand, and I didn't feel anything. So they made this hole in my hand, and then they put something on it that caused it to rapidly heal.
I mean, you did, how do you react to that? I mean, you've talked about this. Things have happened like this throughout your life. You had cancer as a child. And, okay, where you went through certain little bits of treatments, realistically in the 50s, that, you shouldn't have lived the healthy life that you've lived. A lot of people, statistically speaking, that get cancer at that age, it comes back at some stage. With you, it hasn't. You've had these abilities to heal quite fast. Absolutely mind blowing, Byron. I mean,
Now, I've never had a wound heal in 6 hours ever, and to me, it was just more verification because still I was going, well, I know I'm abducted, but maybe I'm not abducted. No, I'm abducted. No, maybe I'm not. Well, they were going, yes, you are.
And for people to know, you didn't realize that you were an abductee right until 2009, and this was happening to you from 9 years of age. So you went throughout your whole life with all these experiences and all these things happening, and you didn't actually find out until 2009. So for anybody that's sitting here thinking, oh, Byron's got a book, he's financially gaining from this here. Well, actually, no. He didn't find out until 2009. He had no reason. All these experiences, he's been consistent with his stories throughout his whole life. So, I mean, to have that level of consistency with your stories sort of does indicate that something has went on here.
So too. Yeah, I used to tell people these stories before I knew what had caused them. And also I had back problems that year, and I went to this masseuse, and somehow I brought up repressed memories, and she said that every one of my muscles that hurt the most were also associated with repressed memories. And she asked me when I had broken my tailbone, and I said, I've never broken my tailbone. She said, yes, you have.
So you have body parts right now that have well, we're going to call them an injury, but they have something, an ailment anyway of some degree that you've never known. Actually has, like for instance, you believe that that's maybe happened on one of these abducted experiences?
Yes.
And you're only, when you go to a doctor and you get scanned, or you, as you say, you're a masseuse or whatever, these people are bringing these sort of things up, and you're like, you don't have a clue.
Right.
Wow.
Now, in 2009, after I discovered this, the friend told me that Whitley Strieber was having a Dreamland Festival and I should go. It was in Memphis, Tennessee, or wherever Elvis is from, Memphis or Nashville, I can't remember which right now. Well, I went to that. Mainly I went because I was going to, one of the presenters was a psychic medium named Marla Freeze, and she had worked as a resource on the television show Medium, and she had worked with police, and she had worked with individuals, all the things that people do. She was pretty well known as a psychic medium. And I took my father's picture with me. Well, I usually sit at the back of the crowd, but this time I wanted to talk to her when she was doing her presentation, so I sat at the very front, on the front row. And I was the second person she read for, and I gave her the picture of my father. She never even looked at it. She was like, you came prepared. And she put it against her leg, the front of her leg, without looking at it, face down, where it was against her leg. And she walked a few steps and she fell down. And she told me that my father had fallen somehow, and this had to do with his death. And I said, yes, he fell and broke his hip, and then he died during the operation, or after the operation. But the thing most interesting to me, she told me, was that I'm the fourth generation to be abducted in our family. My great-grandfather, my grandfather, my father, and me.
Just to let the audience know, we did speak about in the first podcast about how your great auntie I believe. Was it your auntie or?
Oh, the one that went into the asylum?
Yes.
I don't know what her relationship was to me, but one of my relatives from the 18 or 1900s.
So the late 1800s, you had a relative that was in an insane asylum because she was telling people that she was being abducted, basically, that, she was getting visited
The
by.
little men came in her room and talked to her.
Yes, and they, back in the 1800s, late 1800s, even the early 1900s, even the 90s, you'd be you'd be you'd be thrown into an insane asylum for having them thoughts, but more so the 1800s, and you could just imagine what way people would react to that today. Would I say that woman should that woman have been put into an insane asylum? Definitely not. And for the new viewers, Byron, as I say, Byron isn't on any medication. He doesn't take medication. He's not on antipsychotics. He's not on bipolar medication. He doesn't. You don't really drink alcohol, do you?
No.
You don't really drink alcohol. You've never been diagnosed with any mental health issues apart from depression, as you were saying. But listen, we've all got depression to a certain degree. So, and you were told that you're the 4th generation abductee. What does that mean?
Well, it means they took my great-grandfather, my grandfather, and my father, and then me. And we come from Ireland.
Whereabouts in Ireland?
I don't know.
And did the abduction happen in Ireland first?
That's what I thought, but I'm not sure, so I'm not sure about that. But they do abduct a lot of Irish descendant people of Irish descent.
It's very strange. It's very strange, that, isn't it? Because obviously I'm living in Ireland now. That's where I'm from. This will be, it's just crazy. It's just crazy the different the components that go into this. I'll have to look into that one now, Byron, about the whole Irish thing, about because we had obviously a lot of people emigrated from Ireland to America, all around the world, to Australia during the famine. Could be something to do with that.
After I got back from the Dreamland Festival, I looked up to see if I could find anyone who was working with abductees who lived in Texas. And I ran across Daryl Sims, the alien hunter. And I contacted him and I told him my story. And I sent him pictures of my wounds that I would get, the bruises, the punctures. And then he invited me to Houston, and I went and we talked there. And he investigated my case by email and stuff, and he said I was the real thing. And I've talked with his group 2 different times, presented about the same stuff we're talking about.
Well, as I say, sorry, go ahead.
He was a big help in me adjusting to everything.
One thing that stands out to me, right, and I know it shouldn't be like this, but as the human population, we do judge people on who they are. It's just natural. You worked for the CPS, Child Protection Services. You were a teacher. You're highly educated. You are an artist. Now, I understand that for instance, if a person that doesn't have those credentials has these experiences, you should still believe them. It doesn't matter who we are as a person. There shouldn't be a class system to these experiences, but it does add an extra legitimacy to your story, because why would a guy like yourself just randomly start talking about these things? Do you know what I mean? And your guy Daryl Sims, I've heard of him. Was he on TV?
Yes, he's been on a TV show, a couple of times.
Maybe we should get Daryl on sometime and we could all have a 3-way talk about this, because there's more that goes into this than meets the eye, and maybe he can bring a bit more relevance to your story than what I could. And it would be good to get him on at some stage.
know if that'd be possible. He's pretty busy. You never know.
Yeah, I'll make contact with him anyway to see if he wants to come on, and then I'll tell him.
You know, another time I was watching television, I was sitting on my sofa, and suddenly the television show cut right in the middle and started a different television show, one that I would never watch. And my nose, my nose felt as if someone had shoved their finger up in it. It burned, and the minute the TV show changed, my nose hurt. Then it slowly dropped down and quit hurting, and I could breathe better than I ever had before. So I'm pretty sure that they took me and put a nasal implant in at that particular point in time.
The nasal implant is they put it in to make you breathe better?
No, they put some kind of antihistamine inside of my nose to open it up, to make it easier to put the implant in.
I get you. I understand.
And I don't know what the implant was for. They could have actually gone all the way up into my brain.
Essentially, you're being used as a guinea pig.
Well, that's the implants are the way they track us, the way they see what I see, hear what I hear.
And then you have to think to yourself, how long have they been monitoring us? How long have they been around us? Their technology has also progressed. So from just say our 40s until now, your whole family line has been, as you say, you're the fourth generation abductee. What you were told from the beginning until now, their technology would have progressed. So as their technology progresses, also they will be wanting their experiments to go further. Is that
if it's experience? I think they know. They already know what they're doing and they know what's going to happen. So I don't think it's really an experiment. I think it's just these things that they do for whatever their reasons are, and we don't know what their reasons are. Maybe the hybrid program. Maybe some of us, like I've been told that I'm one of them, but I was born here, and that's one reason they watch after me. In fact, I have one last story. The psychic that lives in England, I had her do readings for me, and she sent them to me on MP3s. She'd do the reading, and I would ask her questions on an email, and she would do a reading and record it, and then send it to me. And during one of these readings, she said, "Now, you may think this sounds funny, but you're one of them." Well, after a year, everything she'd told me had come true. So I started putting a little more credit to what she said, and I lay down to meditate, and I started thinking about that I'm one of them. And I started feeling that I've always felt a stranger here on Earth. And I felt a stranger in my family. And all these things, and I thought, suddenly I felt like it was true. And it seemed intellectually like it was true. Well, at that point, a hand, or it was like two fingers, reached inside of my skull at the very back and pulled me out of my body. And I was in this great black void with a geometric pattern wall, but it was like it was made out of fluorescent tubes or something, or crystal tubes. And there were three people that looked like they were made out of glass sitting in front of it, and it was infinite upwards and downwards and side to side. And this voice suddenly said, "The Council of Three." And one of them, who spoke for all of them, said, "We've been waiting for you to discover this. We're very proud of you." Then a bunch of information poured into my skull so fast that I couldn't keep up with it at all, or tell what it was. and I felt in a way that I'd probably know in the future. Then I started moving away from them, like something was pulling me back, and I saw this, what looked like a cookie cutter shape of me that was clear plasma come towards me, and the shape and myself joined together and went into my head, and then I was back away.
That sounds like the best psilocybin experience I've ever heard in my whole entire life. But the fact that it wasn't, the fact that, do you think that you could be a product of mixed alien human breeding?
No, I think that I'm a soul hybrid, that my soul is alien and was put into a human fetus. And I think that there are a lot of us. Star children is what they're called. And then there's some other names for them too.
Wow. The geometric patterns that you've spoke about there is another thing that I have to stress on here. That is a massive thing in the DMT world, of the entities that come whenever you're on a DMT experience, whether it be ayahuasca or whatnot. You will get geometric patterns, and it's you explained a DMT experience, which could be as I say, everybody sees the same entities in these experiences, which is non, it doesn't happen with any other drugs in the world. It's a soul thing. You've said there, it's the soul. So you believe that they can place their, whatever they are, their soul into a human body, a fetus.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. Maybe in the same way that we get a human soul. I don't know. I don't know the mechanics of it, but yes, I'm sure. And with whatever else, all the other things they can do, I don't see why not.
You're talking about technological advancements beyond our comprehension, combined with spirituality and religion. I mean,
Yes.
It makes sense, Byron. It makes sense. Guys, go check Byron's book out. The link for his book is in the comment section of this video. Go read the book, guys. Go watch the first podcast. Byron, I deeply respect you for coming on and sharing these stories. You've brought a lot of clarity from a lot of questions that needed answered from the first podcast. You cleared them up here in the second one. The stories that you have there, the experiences that you've had, to the revelations of you being, as you call them, like a star child. I mean, absolutely mind-blowing, phenomenal. Is there anything else you want to talk about?
No, that pretty much covers everything.